Hello, and welcome to Locutors of Trek, the podcast where we talk about the people, places, and things of Star Trek. So, replicate yourself a Romulan ale or your Synthos selection of choice and join us far beyond the stars.
Locutors of Trek.
Program initiated. Enter when ready.
Hello, it's Dave here.
And Devin.
We are Locutors of Trek.
And Plain Simple Tailors.
And welcome to our discussion once again. This week we're Breaking Bad. We're veering off to the wrong side of the tracks. We are, in fact, going into the land of crime and criminality.
Talking about criminals, see?
Yeah.
Across the galaxy, see?
Now, crimen, the Latin word where we get crime from, means to be reproached of a slander, to be accused of an offense, charged, or most concretely, to be caught in the crime of lewdness or adultery. It can also be the object that represents a crime. So we've got, from its earliest usage, a sense of trespass, let's say, involved in some notion of crime or criminality.
Before we get started, let us not forget you can contact us at locutorsoftrek@gmail.com or Locutors of Trek on Facebook. Send us a message. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like.
Indeed. Not talking would be a crime.
We'll send you a sticker.
Yeah, we're going to have stickers.
Yeah, Locutors of Trek stickers, our first merchandise.
Indeed.
You want one?
You do.
Yeah.
Sticks to your ribs.
I want one. Apparently I want 1,000. I think we could start off with another list. How about that, Dave?
Let's do it.
How about top 5 criminals?
Well,
Makes sense.
I'm going to break the rules right
Not
off
just
the bat.
criminals, I should say criminals of Star Trek.
Oh. Well,
I
that'll
know,
narrow
okay.
my list down.
Erase your initial list you just thought of there. Your list of like 40. You probably thought of from history. But you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Top 5 criminals of Star Trek. Let's do it.
I have broken the rules and cheated right out of the gate. I've got 7 or 8
That's sort of
entries
apropos for this episode.
I think it is. So I have one that's kind of number 7/number 0, so I'm going to keep that one for the very, very end.
It's what?
Sort of 0/7/8. So yeah.
So what one are you starting on?
I'm going to start on my number 6.
Okay.
Here we go. This guy comes from a pretty creepy episode of DS9.
Okay.
It's all about obsession, revenge, and cold-blooded murder.
Oh, I think
And
maybe.
taunting is a Cardassian by the name of Silarin Prin.
Oh, is that his name? The one who's going after Kira?
The burned face,
Oh,
and
my.
yeah,
Wow.
has
yes.
such a creepy monologue about.
Now, why is he a
his
criminal?
observation of the
Tell us
creature.
why he's a criminal, Dave.
Well, Silarin Prin is, well, first of all, he's a war criminal. Let's just say that right off the bat, because he's working in the Cardassian occupation.
To him.
But he's working there when the Shakar resistance cell launches an attack on his commander, for whom he's a secretary or something like that, I think. And he's badly injured in that attack, but not killed. And he vows revenge on this group of Bajoran resistors. And years later returns and systematically murders them.
Right, he gets to quite a few of them before he gets to Kira.
Yeah, he kills almost every one of them.
Well, I guess being a murderer makes you a criminal.
And at this point, a spree murderer, or at
Yeah.
least a multiple murderer, let's say.
Yeah, that's an intense episode when he's got Kira strapped down and she's pregnant. And she's
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's a really
That one cuts you right to
terrifying
the bone,
moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Good pick for your 7 or 6 or whatever it was. So should I go or do you? No, you know what? You go again until you get to 5.
Okay.
You go until you get to 5.
All right. Here's 5.
Yep.
Here's 5. This I wanted to broaden my horizons a little bit. I don't really stick to my 2 favorite series, but this is well, I think he's a criminal. From Voyager, season 5, episode 19. This is a guy named Koros.
Koros.
played, I think, by Jason Alexander, actually.
Oh, Think Tank.
Yeah, Think Tank. Who they're these folks who sort of say they've got a way to help Voyager escape a sort of a bounty hunter who's on their tail, I think as I recall. But it turns out that their interests are far more creepy and sinister, and they just kind of want to keep 7 of 9.
Why is he a criminal, Dave?
To my read of him as a criminal is that he comes to the situation, he and his think tank come to the situation in bad faith. They're intending to exploit and defraud the crew of the Voyager, and particularly Captain
They're
Janeway.
con artists in a sense. Or,
They're fraudsters. Yeah,
fraudsters,
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I buy that one. All right, that's a good one. He's a good character. He's very, very sinister.
He's
He might as well
cool,
be twirling his mustache.
chill demeanor is just like
Yeah.
he's the total opposite of George Costanza that way.
Yeah.
in demeanor, too. Which is a neat
Can you
turn
do
for him at that point.
anti-George?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I can.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my number 5, Cousin Gala.
Oh, yeah. Talk about a private moon.
Yes, he has his own moon through his criminal enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
No question why he's a criminal. He's a purveyor of weapons to all the worst people he can find.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think
Probably
he
responsible
really...
for the death of millions.
Yeah, likely
almost
doesn't
certainly.
care much about treaty arrangements or legalities about what he can sell to whom.
Nope. But real fun to watch on screen. So
That's
I like
true.
Cousin Gala.
Also attempted murder on Quark at
Yeah,
least
that's
once.
always fun. Even when they're just talking about him, it's funny. He doesn't even really have to be there.
That's true. That's true. Actually, he's a large character before he ever shows up
Yeah.
on screen. Cousin Gala.
And then he shows up quite a few times.
Oh, yeah. He must show up 5 or 6 times during the series,
Yeah,
I think.
the one with Hogarth and
Yeah.
the
Magnificent Ferengi,
the
of course.
Magnificent Ferengi, of course. Yeah, and, yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe not that many times, but it's several anyway.
Not a good dude, but good character. Cousin Gala.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
my number 5.
Yeah. All right. Now, my number 4 here is an early episode of Enterprise, which I found just as a premise and a sort of take was great fun. This is the Malurian illegal miner, Garros, from season 1, episode 8. I've now lost the title of the episode.
Okay.
It's a sort of a 18th century sort of a world. They come down there to Paul Warren's Archer about not going down. And it turns out this guy is dumping toxic chemicals from the mining process in a water stream nearby, and it's poisoning the residents of this region. And, you know, to me, he stands out in terms of criminality because of his utter criminal neglect and lack of concern for the sentient beings around him. You know, I mean, I don't suppose there's any body of positive law that would restrict him from mining for things those people don't know are there or have no use for, especially because they don't know there's any aliens out there. But his reckless disregard of their safety, I think, certainly lands him for most ethical standpoints clearly as a criminal.
I must admit I don't really recall that episode or character
Aha.
off the top of my head. Interesting.
And as a nifty kind of nod to like the old sort of like Body Snatchers style sci-fi things in like the 50s and 60s, right? Because at one point, one of his henchmen gets injured and his face sort of breaks partly off and he's got this reptilian visage underneath. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a fun episode.
Okay. Interesting. My next pick,
Oh, yeah.
a Walsh.
Walsh.
Leo Walsh.
Now refresh me who Leo Walsh is. I've lost him entirely. Oh, this is delicious.
Harcourt Fenton Mudd.
Harcourt Fenton Mudd? The thief?
Oh, come now.
The swindler and con man?
Entrepreneur.
The liar and rogue?
Did I leave you with that impression?
Harcourt Fenton Mudd.
Yes, Leo Walsh, Harcourt Fenton Mudd is my number 4. I just love the gag. Now, I guess there's 2 versions of Harry Mudd. I'm more talking about the TOS version played by, I can't remember the actor's name.
Mm-hmm.
But you just...
For now, we'll have to
they're just
identify him as
very
not
different-
Rainn Wilson.
They're very different characters. I mean, I guess I could sum it all up into one character, but like Rainn Wilson plays kind of like this psychopathic murderer broken from prison kind of
Oh yeah.
character, which it's interesting. Those two portrayals, I feel like would work better flipped. I could see Harcourt, the original version, kind of becoming Rainn Wilson's character after a horrible experience, but it's hard for me to imagine Rainn Wilson's version becoming this kind of
4 or 5 years later. You know?
This kind of very kind of almost aloof, kind of happy-go-lucky, very very charming and quick on his feet kind of guy.
Yeah. It. I mean that one episode with Rainn Wilson is great fun in terms of the.
Yeah,
particularly just the fate of that poor Gormagander.
Poor Gormagander.
What a great creature that is.
I like a good Gormagander.
But his super murderous Harry Mudd was a real gritty reboot for that character.
Yeah.
Not that I mean I loved watching Rainn Wilson do it, honestly.
I don't think it necessarily needed to be Harry Mudd.
Nope, didn't need to be.
I'm not super upset that it was or anything. I mean, I could.
But they could have introduced somebody
I think it works
different.
better flipped. But I'm sure there's some way that character could become that character. But
Yeah.
I mean,
Interesting guy,
because
though.
he is an adaptable fella, and they do sort of like take him that way near the end when his wife shows
That's
up.
true.
And
That's true.
It gets funnier and a little more lighthearted. And he's like, "Oh, geez, my wife's here." Like, so they sort of like change that character right at the end there. In a sort of way that does bridge the gap a little better. I think they were aware of that. So
Yeah. And in some ways, I think...
The more I think about it, it's not as bad as
And I wonder what that has to do with casting as well. Because I wonder if they had Wilson play Mudd closer to a comedic version, that people wouldn't have just seen Dwight Schrute in space.
Well, that's the thing.
You know what? Like, I can see them saying, like,
Dwight
do
Schrute
something
is
different.
almost Harry Mudd.
In a really weird way.
I think they probably saw Dwight Schrute and was just like, that would be a sweet Harry Mudd. But then, I don't know, he thought that,
But I can see not wanting to
that,
typecast and not wanting to draw too much on that thing and trying something different. But yeah, it would have been very interesting.
But yes, Leo Walsh.
Yeah. Well, and now for another dark turn here.
Oh my.
My number 3, easily, I think, the most visually gruesome criminal enterprise we've seen in Star Trek is the body farm of Vajazel in season 1 of Picard. That opening of, what is that, episode 4? Episode 5, something like that, is just gut-wrenching. And I was really not sad to see her Enterprise get blown to pieces.
No.
What a horrible, horrible person.
Yep.
Yeah. As one of those people, you just don't even really need to ask why we think she's a criminal. She's just a bad, bad person.
Good character, though.
Very excellent. Like, well played and, like, really, brilliantly despicable.
Yeah. Like Kai Wynn, who's not on my list because I don't see her as a criminal so much as a villain. But, she plays it so well, you just can't help but hate her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. By the end of it, you just don't even like her face. Yeah.
Don't my child me, please.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my child. Oh, yeah.
Walk with the prophet's child.
How many times do you want to be close to an airlock when she says that? Boink! Oh, my. Whew. Yeah.
Good pick.
Thank you. So
okay, I'm cheating as well. Not as bad as you, because I don't know how we're getting back to your number 8 or whatever.
It's happening.
Okay, you just let me know when it's time.
Cool.
Can't wait to see this math. 2, 8, 1. Oh, so I have a tie here.
Okay.
One is Retaya, from the Deep Space Nine episode Improbable Cause, I believe. It's the one who Odo thinks blew up Garrick's shop.
All right.
And he's the scent dealer. He deals in fragrances.
Right.
And he's only in that one scene, but I don't really know that actor. But Jesus, he bring a lot of personality to that one
I
scene.
remember him as being like weird, like subtly menacing the whole time.
And confident.
Yeah.
But like uncertain at the same time. He's just portraying a lot of things. In
Yeah.
This way. Like, he's just going for broke.
That's a lovely deep cut there.
Well, Odo's like, it's interesting because these two fragrances combined become a very powerful explosive. I had no idea. Odo usually breaks people down pretty quick, but they had a nice little back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you didn't know, then why didn't you want me to combine the two scents? Like I said, I just didn't think your lady friend would like the aroma. I love watching that scene. I love that character. But the tie is from the Enterprise episode, Canamar.
Okay.
Which I think we'll probably talk about later in this episode. Perhaps not.
Okay.
But it's the episode where Trip and Archer are imprisoned on a prison ship on the way to Canamar, which is a prison. And Trip's stuck next to this fellow. See, I don't know that his name ever comes up. Mm-hmm. But he's a very talkative fella.
Oh, yeah.
And I really get a kick out of that.
Yeah, he's great fun.
He's just like, my last partner left me in the this ice planet, and it took me 48 hours to get back to the base, and I lost 6 toes in the process, and he's like, I don't know if I get out of here, I'm going to get plastic surgery. And he's just like, actually, maybe the plastic surgeon can fix my missing toes as well. And he just keeps on talking, and Trips eventually just loses it, and he's just like, I can't take this anymore. He's just like, no, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was being so annoying. I mean, I just thought it would be nice to have a good conversation before I go to prison for the rest of my life. And then of course Trips is like, okay, you know what, I'm sorry. But he just turns away from me. He's just like, no.
Oh, man.
I don't know, he's very funny.
Yeah, he's a great character.
I like those two characters.
Oh, man.
That's my number 3.
All right. So my number 2 here is a criminal for whom I actually have something of a soft spot. He really gets a hard end. He gets stuck in a hard place because he doesn't see what's coming. And that is Bilby.
Oh, Bilby. What a great pick. You know, if I'd have thought of it, he'd have been on my list too.
And I love it in that O'Brien's debt to his wife.
I don't think I just viewed him as a criminal because I love him so much. Actually.
Yeah, no,
Bilby's
but like he's so humanized.
Yeah.
You know, he's not just allowed to sit as some sort of stereotype.
Like you see him on par with O'Brien in that episode. You don't see O'Brien as a criminal, so you don't see his buddy Bilby as a criminal necessarily either.
Absolutely, right?
You know?
He's a guy with a job. And it's a dirty job.
Talks about his family and his cat.
Yeah.
What, you don't like my wife's cake? Actually, to be honest, it's a bit dry. He's like, it is, isn't it? You should see how those other two pretend it's the greatest thing in the world. And that's where it changes for Bilby. And he's just like, you see that, Chester? I just met me an honest man.
Yeah.
And Chief's just like, oh, Jesus.
Oh, yeah. It's
what a great episode, though.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, like another O'Brien Must Suffer episode, because it's like, why did they randomly pick the chief engineer of a space station way off in like nowhere land for a mission like this?
Don't ask that. Shh. Shh. The plot gods say no.
Yeah, it's all right. Okay.
This premise is not subject to question.
Now, I guess the argument they might use in the episode is being not a security officer or a command officer. Mm-hmm.
He's
he
not
wouldn't
known.
be on the radar.
That would be my best guess.
And he's not even a commissioned officer.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be on any kind of list, really.
I don't think so.
And for the same reason he's on that show, O'Brien is just such a real guy.
Yeah.
So it's like you can throw him into any situation and anyone's just gonna like take to him and love him.
It's true. It's true. He's a very personable guy, and he kind of knows how to get along, you know. Yeah. Poor old Bilby.
Great pick.
Yeah. All right, you're number 2 there.
My number 2 is not as likable as Bilby on any level. As I was rewatching the episode, maybe the most horrible person we've ever seen on any Star Trek. Devoid of any moral character at all, or any remorse, capable of anything and everything. Kivas Fajo.
Oh.
He is the literal worst.
Absolute amoral piece of space garbage.
Yeah, the worst. And then when Data finally realizes he's the worst, he's just like, dude, you're like the worst. He's just like, yeah, but Data, don't you understand? I was a poor, starving, neglected, abused child on the streets of whatever planet. Mm-hmm. Data just like looks at him for a second. He's just like, okay, that's not true. My father was very wealthy. He was a thief.
Yeah. He's so.
But even at the end, you think like he's just this mad collector, and of course he's like become completely cold to anything involved in that. But clearly he cares for this person he kidnapped when she was a child. He even brags about the fact that she was barely an adult.
Yeah.
When he's like, it's gross. They literally make him the worst.
Oh, and like he's aware of how repugnant he is, and he uses it to his advantage. Like it's so nasty. And when it brings it down to that unanswered question of whether Data really shot
this is why this is a
Fajo in the end,
great Data episode.
It's leaving that hanging is a brilliant narrative choice.
But it wasn't hanging.
They know that it was discharged, and I think it means he did shoot him.
He definitely tried to shoot him. Now, this is the conversation we can have now, a bit of an aside and about Data. I think this is one of the biggest Data moments in the show that they sort of just kind of try to gloss over for the rest of it, to say that he's not capable of such things or whatever. Now, in that scene, Data seems to be at the position where he's not going to fire on Fajo, and then Fajo starts to taunt him and start to tell him all the reasons why he should kill him. He's just like, Data, and like, this is the thing. See, Data in his mind, he wants to get rid of Fajo, and he's trying, because he's being Data. If he can find I don't know what it is. It's like not Vulcan logic, but it's like Data's kind of logic. If he can find that kind of computer version of rationality or justification, whatever that needs to be for Data. And he's looking for that. He's like going through all the calculations, and he's trying to get there, and he can't get there. And Fajo's like, I'm going to keep doing this, Data. He's like, you have to kill me. This is what he's telling me. You have to kill me because I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to take more people. I'm going to kill more people. He had just killed a woman that he clearly cared for, even though he kidnapped her. So I think that's the calculation Data needed. Now I can kind of do that needs of the many, needs of the few version of some version of that. He's just like, I can end. He's just told me. It's not a guess now. He's now, because Data could guess that. He's just like, he's going to keep doing it, but I don't know. But he's now told him. He's like, Data, I am going to keep doing this.
Well, and the thing that I'm struggling to remember about the episode at that point is, does Data know the Enterprise is on its way at that point? He's just trying to mount an escape attempt, right?
Yes.
So
that's why he's beamed out at the last second and doesn't.
Yeah, because ultimately he can't assume he has any hope of escape. And that to me is it's the other side of that, right? The other balance is,
and he's angry.
He will just
Data's
do this,
version of
and
angry.
he will destroy me. He will destroy everybody else, and he'll just keep doing this, completely unfazed by this incident, other than irritated that he had to destroy me. And my unique life will have been ended, and so will many others. Right? Like I think that's got to be the reasoning he ends up with.
That's his calculation that he gets to.
Yeah.
But he's not willing to say that to Commander Riker. He immediately lies to Commander Riker back on the ship. Data, the weapon was discharged. It's like, oh, something must have happened during the... So they also say how there's several episodes based on the premise that Data can't lie. They make him advocates and judges and things like that because they say he can't lie and everyone believes it. But he does it right there in that scene. Like, there's a lot of things in this episode about Data they just never talk about again.
Well, and
which
the
is
only
great
other episode I can think that they do it in is the episode where they all lose time and memory, right? And Data has been running the whole ship for 3 days or something. And he's attempting desperately to keep his promise to them, but it involves falsifying things and omitting stuff and being really sketchy and attempting to deceive the whole crew all the time for the rest of his life, which is a horrible burden for him to try and bear, But yeah, he's absolutely capable of deception.
Even to his friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Data does what Data thinks is right, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'd make a good captain for that reason.
Well, and he did on the Sutherland.
Yeah. But yeah, back from that aside, Kivas Fajo, played by the actor I really enjoy and everything, Saul Rubinek.
Oh, yeah.
Well portrayed character.
Oh, yeah. Great actor.
Your number one, Dave.
My
or
number
is your
one...
number 8 now?
This is my number 1/1.
Okay, 1/1.
Yeah. Because these are two characters we often see together.
This is 2 characters, your 1/1.
Yeah.
So it's 1 and 1.
But it's only 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is someone who likes to consider himself as the greatest criminal around, and maybe the actual greatest criminal around. which is Quark.
No, rejected. Quark is just a legitimate businessman. I know this due to my 2 semesters.
And
at,
Morn. Morn is one of the cleverest criminals we know of.
I'll give you Morn. Quark is a legitimate businessman. I would like prove to me he is a criminal.
I'll just go back over Odo's Crime Watch statistics. There's
Odo
a lot
is
of-
clearly not a biased participant, an unbiased participant in this proceedings. Okay, all right, continue, but I've objected for the record.
Oh, that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine. But I assert that Quark is willing to skirt the edges of people's laws for $1.
Wait, are we talking about Ferengi laws here, or...
No, other people's laws.
Well, what are we even talking about?
See, this is why some people call him a criminal.
Okay.
Morn, however, is just a really excellent bank robber.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
really good.
yeah.
Long game.
Amazing long game bank robber.
Yeah.
Ladies'
I didn't
man,
think of him, but you're right.
clever, wit, tells a great joke,
Handsome.
storyteller. Yeah,
Very handsome.
if only we could all be like Morn. I mean, guy never shuts up. But
I mean, he lost his hair from hiding latinum in
I mean,
his stomach.
his third stomach, fourth stomach, something like that.
Probably a couple of them.
Yeah, I think Morn is one of the greatest running gags in Star Trek. Honestly.
Yeah,
I
oh,
love
yeah.
Morn so much.
Me too.
Yeah, so those
that
are
episode
those.
was like the best Morn episode.
Oh, so good. And that he just
That was the
basically
death of Morn, too.
that he doesn't show up in almost the entire episode is my favorite part about the episode.
But you get everything about him. He sleeps in a mud bath. He was married. He's a criminal. You learn everything about Morn in that episode. And
So
everybody
great.
loves him. Like, everyone. He talks to the ensigns, the lieutenants, the commanders, like all the randos at Quarks. Like, everybody
loves Morn. Morn's just a good, solid guy.
Great guy. Never shuts up.
Never shuts up. All right, you're number 1.
My number 1. Okay, we're getting dark again.
Okay.
One of the great, I think, short roles in Star Trek, played by a great actor for this type of role as well. And my number 1 is Lon Suder.
Oh.
Now, no doubt a criminal,
Suder.
as he is a murderer.
Yeah. And he knows he is.
He knows it, and he perhaps can't help himself. Now, there's
Perhaps.
certainly issues of intent and motive with him. He's definitely he's not quite right.
No, he has a fascinating chance at redemption in the Delta Quadrant.
Great story arc. It's short.
Yeah.
See, he becomes a great hero. Like, I love his arc. Like, he's on my list as the criminal, because in those episodes, I'm just talking about those episodes. But where he goes, I really love that as well.
Yeah.
It just seems so genuine. Like, but it's coming from Brad Dourif, so even when he's being genuine, he's just like, "What's the problem?
so
Why won't she
terrifying."
listen to my thing?" And you're like, "Chill out, man. Just chill."
I know. I think I would be scared of him with like
I know.
a grapefruit spoon in his hand.
They could pretty much only put like Tuvok to deal with him. Everyone else would just be so creeped out or afraid.
Yeah. Oh man, Suter, what a great call.
I mean, it's a great episode. It's a bit of a mystery. They're finding the body. They're just like, "Why did you kill him?" I just didn't
couldn't
really
help
like
myself.
the way he looked at me.
And it's a really interesting
It's not
study of
something
sort
you
of like
normally
that.
see in Star Trek. Right?
Well, and that problem of being stuck in the same thing, like stuck in this can for
It
2.5
got to
years
him
or whatever,
first,
yeah.
and he was obviously probably the most unstable going into it anyway. So it
Yeah.
makes sense that it kind of got to him first.
And do I recall he had been Maquis when they picked him up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Chakotay says he enjoyed it a little too much
Mm-hmm.
when they would have to do the killing of the Cardassians and stuff. That was Suter's favorite part. But he's just like, he always did his job. He like clearly enjoyed it too much, but he like stopped right before I would have to step in. On Voyager, I just assumed he would always do that as well. He would always stop before I would have to do something. But of course, it didn't work out like that
No, unfortunately, no.
for a couple of ensigns or something.
A tortured soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now for my number 0/7/8.
Okay.
Whichever way you want to take this.
So is this like the top of your list or the bottom of your
well,
list or both?
it's kind of both, because in one way I don't want to call this character like through and through a criminal,
Okay.
but they did go to jail.
Okay.
For a
Is it
crime
T-
they
Is
did
it
commit.
Tom Paris?
No, it's Cassidy Yates.
Oh, Cassidy.
Cassidy Yates is my favorite criminal in Star
Cassidy's a
Trek.
criminal.
She smuggled.
She was smuggling to criminals.
Yeah.
Or like two people she knew were at least outlawed.
Absolutely, right? And she went in and she said, I think it's the right thing to do. And when she went to jail, she said, I think that's probably the right thing too.
I mean, she's easily my favorite character of all the ones we've mentioned so far.
Oh, Cassidy's so great.
That's fair. I love Cassidy.
And was smart about it. She's a very, like, she was running that.
Yeah, she
Smuggling
started to
run
date
for-
the commander of the station. That's
She,
the
may,
long
she was
game.
running it from sometime after she started dating him or maybe before.
I think before.
So, like, it was a long game.
I think before. I don't think we get that information, but
Yeah, it'd been a while.
because they weren't dating that long.
No, not by then. 6 or 8 months, I think, maybe would have been about as long as they'd been dating by then. Maybe not even that long. But yeah,
Good
she does her
pick.
time and she comes back. Yeah,
So she's the top and bottom of your list.
exactly.
Okay.
She's the heights
Cassidy
and the
Yates.
depths.
It's like the Cassidy sandwich.
That's right. It's my bookmarks. It's
Yeah.
my Yates marks.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like it. All right, I
Alright.
guess that's the list.
All right,
Shall we move on to criminality?
let's do it. Dun, dun, dun.
How about criminals from the pre-warp era that show up in Star Trek? Such as a Khan, for example. Or maybe a Rasmussen. I'm not sure if he was pre-warp, but he's certainly from the past.
Rasmussen's from the 22nd century, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, I think
So he's not pre-warp,
He's not
but
pre-warp.
he's low warp. I don't know if he... It doesn't say what part of the century he's from.
No.
So he may have been before Archer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
You never know.
So pre-going anywhere with warp.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
there
like,
would
I
have
don't
been...
think he's not pre-Cochrane.
No, he's not
No.
pre-Cochrane, but he's certainly like pre-warp. Might be even pre-warp 5. So it would have been, the kind of things that Boomer was traveling on and that kind of thing, right?
So that criminals, they're showing up in the future.
Yeah. Khan as well, of course, is
Of
a great
course, Khan,
pre-war
yeah.
criminal.
He is a war criminal, I guess you would call him.
Absolutely.
Perhaps a dictatorial tyrant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's said to have ruled over half the globe
Mm.
before he was forced off of it.
With an iron ponytail.
Yes. Yes, with an iron ponytail. The smoldering eyes of Ricardo Montalban. What a great film. Yeah, those two both come from pretty wild periods in Earth's history.
Yeah.
When, for instance, as we learn in Encounter at Farpoint, legal notions had changed to the extent that they had decided to really kill all the lawyers and decide that you're guilty until proven innocent, which seems to be the kind of outgrowth of a kind of profound anti-intellectual, anti-establishment, anti-institutional drive in these people who had experienced nuclear ravages and the depredations of these great powers finishing themselves off against each other, And I can see why that would put you in that mindset if you were living in the post-apocalyptic hellscape,
Mm-hmm.
Although that is one of my favorite things about Star Trek, though, is that after the apocalypse comes spaceships and aliens.
Yep.
that's
Bring on the apocalypse.
kind
as
of
they
hopeful
say.
in that sense.
Yeah.
Hasten it unto me if I get warp drive.
What do you think about criminality on a galactic scale, Dave? And in the age of warp travel, it seems like to me that would breed more criminals rather than less, with the increased ability or at least perception of being able to just get away, commit a crime somewhere, and just go so far away that
Yeah.
you're not going to be accountable for it.
And, I would think even that the vast, deep reaches of space between planets would be excellent places to have a ship at your mercy, And we see that in an early Enterprise episode. I think it's maybe the second episode of the series where they stumble upon a derelict ship and find the crew inside being drained of their body fluids.
Oh, yeah.
And then go after the ship that has done this and proceed to get themselves into terrible trouble. Which is really one of those themes of the early episodes of Enterprise. They're in way over their head, and they're just learning that every time. But, the sense of what is and isn't criminal on a galactic scale, to me, is a really difficult question. And it's highlighted by an episode like that, where the one species is simply preying on other creatures, and for them that is just something that makes sense. The Hirogen don't believe they're breaking any laws when they go hunting things, because that's Herogen law.
Yeah, the leniency you give to individual culture is such a hard line to draw on that galactic scale.
Yeah. Yeah, and
The Federation is the one that has to try to do that. Like everyone else just sort of
everyone
goes
else
by
has
their
sort of
own
decided
rules.
to push their own rules, right?
Yeah.
The Federation is a weird experiment in attempting to harmonize rules or find rules that are sufficient that we can all live with them.
And don't seem so individually cultural centric that it offends anyone. It's like, no, you see, this is a collection of many. It's like, this isn't just how humans do things, or this isn't just how Vulcans do things.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of is.
Well, it's pushing that fundamental importance of the rights of sentient life, or life in general, even beyond that, is definitely the thing the Federation does. If we were going to say, like, that's what they're going to push, that's their ideological bent, then sure.
Now, it's interesting you brought up Enterprise. That was one of the running themes that they ran with in the first season or two, was that there was a lot of crime out there. That's not what Archer and the crew were expecting to find. They were expecting to find more Vulcans and like even Klingons, people who are maybe aggressive and strange to you, but that you can talk to and get along with.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were expecting to find things that are reminiscent of pre-warp Earth out there in space. Having to deal with that stuff again.
And how many times they get played because of their own expectations is, I think, another dimension of that point you're making.
Like Canamar, the episode we were talking about earlier, where there were all kinds of criminals on that ship.
Yeah.
Smugglers and murderers and
and
Nausicaans.
They themselves become criminals on several occasions, right, in various places.
But also, of course, they run into the Cabal and the Orion Syndicate. And the Orion Syndicate is, of course, an interesting one, because it was around right away where the Federation had to write it right into their, make an amendment to deal with the slavery of the Orion Syndicate. So they encountered them right away, and they were obviously a large enough force and problem that they had to come up with a solution.
They
not a solution, but
some pretty strict boundaries, too, because, when we see the original series episode where they encounter the Orions, they're still quite, they know of Orions, but they're still pretty mysterious to them, so it's clear, I think, that the Federation, and particularly humans and Vulcans at least, have kept a pretty wide berth around Orions.
Yeah, dear Westmore, I hear you have very exotic women.
Yes. Please allow me to tell you how to
in
manipulate
Enterprise, they flip the script on that, and they say that the women have a pheromone that controls the men. And not just the men of their own species, but basically men in general. Which, again, brings us back to Tendi.
Yes.
Is Tendi controlling like half of the crew of the Cerritos?
That's a good question, because she doesn't seem to be
No one's
having that
mentioned
effect
it.
on people.
Boimler knows everything about these like species and stuff.
Yeah.
Boimler has never even mentioned it. Because he's under control of the pheromones.
He might. Now, the other possibility is that, like, T'Pol took an olfactory suppressant.
Yes.
So that she could be around humans without making faces.
Yeah. Very smelly.
Maybe Tendi has to use something like a kind of like a antiperspirant or something, or some dietary additive that will suppress those
like mandatory, pheromones. Like to be in Starfleet, you have to
Maybe.
take this because we can't have you controlling everybody.
There's certainly, that's true of Deltans as well. Deltans apparently have either a pheromonal or a light psychic ability, which makes them unbelievably attractive to other creatures. And so they tend to take like vows of celibacy and try and suppress that to them as much as possible while they're on board ship with people, because other species just can't friggin' deal with them pheromonally. They just go crazy.
Betazoids don't have to not read your mind or your emotions.
No, that's true, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if betazoids can practice mind control, though.
Not mind control, but they can.
They can certainly mess with you with telepathy, I imagine.
And like read your thoughts.
Yeah. Because they certainly speak telepathic.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, Dave.
All right.
Are Archer and his crew inadvertent criminals in those early seasons, or just misfits? Because at the very least, they're misfits.
Well,
At least for a while,
yes.
despite their best efforts. But do they break enough cultural norms and protocols from enough different places to be labeled a criminal?
I think the one act that I think of from the really early episodes that would say that to me would be the Sanctuary of Pajem, where they do create a galactic diplomatic incident.
They certainly do destroy a monument.
And
Vulcan.
expose a Vulcan listening station and prove the Andorians right.
Dave, they destroyed a monument.
Oh,
a
right.
Sacred ancient monument.
Sacred, right. Yeah, very calm. Mainly meditation. Yeah.
The thing is, you dig a tunnel and you go under the sacred monument. Then you do your secret sneaky stuff. But you can't disturb the sacred monument, Dave.
No. You just dig a tunnel under it.
You just dig a tunnel underneath it to use it as a shield, as one does human shields and things like that.
It's like monk shields.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're polite about it. Oh man, yeah, I think that might be the one that to me makes them into actual sort of criminals. The Klingons try that on for size and it doesn't really work, but that one to me that's about as close as they really come to deliberately becoming criminals.
I mean, it does work. They send him to Rurapente.
They do. Good old Rurapente.
So I guess he is convicted of being a criminal in the Klingon Empire.
Yep. Proud
And
tradition
then
among
a
Confederation
jailbreaker.
captains.
So he just compounds the criminality. That's why they didn't get in on the Federation early. It's like the lead ahead was a double
These
criminal.
people don't respect our laws.
Broke out of our sacred prison, Rurapente.
I mean, they brought that guy back that one time, but come on. What have they done for us lately?
Yeah.
Bloody Romans. Romani ite domum.
Splinter factions. What do you think of those?
Are
Such
they
as-
necessarily criminal?
Is Terra Prime criminal organization?
They're a terrorist organization, certainly, which I don't know what that makes. I assume because of the nature of terrorism as using fear and terror and political violence to achieve political ends. I think they're definitely criminals for sure.
Of course.
Much like the Duras family, I think can only be considered criminals in the end.
Their leader, played by the great Peter Weller.
Yes.
In
Oh
a-
yeah.
In a great
yeah.
role by him.
Sorry, I thought you meant for a second that Duras was played by Peter Weller. I was like, wow.
Oh, no.
Well
I have no
disguised,
idea
sir.
who played Duras.
No,
actually.
that would be a
I was
truly
just waiting for
submerged
him to
role
get
for him.
killed, and then it happened.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Duras just was on his way out the whole
Yeah.
time.
Nobody likes that guy.
Yeah, good old Peter Weller though.
Peter Weller.
Yeah, it was a good role.
It
He was
was.
really another despicable guy. Much
But
like,
again, he
Kivas Fajo.
made his case. He's just like they're out there, just especially after the Zindi attack. Archer literally does that. Everyone they meet, he goes, "We're from a place called Earth. Here's how you find it: the Soul System."
Yep.
Like, don't open with that. Maybe figure out who you're talking to, and then
That's right. Here's my address and driver's license.
so I don't think their overall points were very forward thinking, but I think maybe they had a few points about Archer and the early Starfleet. Like that early
I think
Archer
some of these-
expedition, I mean, it had to happen. You sort of have to go out there, like the Vulcan Expeditionary Force and all that. But the way they were doing it, and just sort of sticking their nose in everything. They weren't just going out to look and see what was around. They were going out to sort of,
Well, they kind of couldn't help themselves, right?
yeah.
And that's the thing that they just can't stop doing, which ultimately is that, Enterprise is in a certain way a long form argument about why the Prime Directive exists. And in that, it really is very successful in showing that, the kinds of problems they run into are
They
precisely
fail
the
at that all
things
the time.
a
and-
Prime Directive is trying to hedge out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think one of the things about that movement, which I think we can see echoes of in the movement that Worf gets almost hooked up with on Risa,
Oh, jeez, yeah.
who are also these sort of social conservatives in a certain sense, but are willing to use.
Yeah, they're very much,
violent
they
means.
seem like the remnants of Terra Prime.
They could be a kind of ideology that develops out of that line of thinking, right? Yeah, the real problem there is that they end up going into faction and ultimately sedition, right? They start from a place where they may have some kind of substantive critique, but move from that to a place where I think what you see in the end is what they really want to do is tear everything down. What they really want to do is be in charge.
And that sentiment never seems to go away within the Federation and seems to have strong support and kind of lineage. Because you get to that and then you get to Leighton, where Leighton's thinking the same thing. He's like, we're not taking the threat seriously. We're not thinking about Earth. We're not like, I have to take over and settle everything. And then, you can all have your power back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And is willing to break all sorts of rules. Do that. I mean, let alone Section 31 for that matter, which is, I think, in the sense of being a black ops faction, they're almost by definition criminal. I mean, under the sort of...
They seem to commit a lot of criminal acts in their business.
And I mean, Section 31 folks and what's his face in particular? Sloan will make these sort of arguments based in a kind of realpolitik kind of logic. But those are always if-then arguments that are hypothetical in nature, right? They're always because this, then this, but then you could, so we have to. And none of them are based in any real principle other than we can do it because we said so,
As Julian points out to Sloan, it's like they almost kind of take this kind of poor me approach with it. We know what we are.
Yeah.
I'm glad there's men like you. It's great that there can be good men like you because I'm doing all the hard work.
Yes.
The men like you can't do and don't have to deal with.
Yeah. I'm doing it for you.
Yeah. And Julian's just like, well, do you want like a thank you? He's just like, no, I don't. Like, and it's a weird place those guys are in. Like,
Sloan's really mentally unassailable from where he is in that sense. Yeah.
No, I don't want your thank you because I do horrible things all the time. Like, he's like, it's this two-sided coin.
Yeah. He reminds me very much of Garrick in those moments. Because Garrick's never quite anywhere. He's always just observing you like a step ahead.
Sure.
So he's never settling
himself.
himself anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Sloan is doing that all the time. He's always taking an angle so he can maneuver you.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all he's ever doing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he that's one of those moments where he really seems to be as close to sincere as he ever gets with Julian. Where he's like, I'm doomed from the outset, and I accept that.
Somebody has to do it, or I've been convinced that somebody has to do these things.
Yeah.
This is necessary.
Yeah. But I mean, Section 31 obviously begs the question and is the embodiment of the question, quis custos custodiat, who watches the watchman? And they set themselves up as the unwatched guards at the gates.
The Gorn comic that we read, where the Splinter faction thought quite the opposite of the Federation, that they were being too isolationist and just too pent up.
Oh, yeah.
With fear and uncertainty, and they need to be more expansionist. And there's another coup d'etat, so like another kind of criminal organization within the Gorn society there.
Yeah, and criminality of a very high order in that sense. Right?
Well, they slay the royal family and break all the eggs.
Yeah, add some assassination and some mass murder in there, and you're all good to go.
Regicide.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Multiple infanticide. They're just going to go the whole hog there.
How many asides can we get in? Not to go off in an aside.
Oh.
What do we want to say about the Orion Syndicate, Dave?
Well,
Tendy says that some Orions haven't been pirates in a few years, but there seem to be plenty of Orion pirates and criminals
I
out
think
there,
so, and
even at the time of Lower Decks.
I think the Orion Syndicate has become very much a brand as well, because Bilby worked for the Orion Syndicate.
He did.
We don't see a single Orion. Most of the episodes we're dealing with the Orion Syndicate, we don't see a single Orion.
No.
So the sense in which that operation has transformed itself over the centuries, to me, is one of its most interesting features. That, when we meet it in Enterprise, it's this very overtly sort of barbarous practice of these sort of women in the gibbet kind of cage things.
Oh yeah, they have
off and
giant auctions. Where they
prisoners and slaves.
off.
Yeah, exactly right. And
they're not hiding anything, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the expansion of the Federation forces them
underground.
And so
Which
they
almost
become...
makes them more dangerous in a way.
Sure.
It's certainly harder to stamp out.
Yeah, it's the upshot of that episode with Bilby in it, for sure, I think, is that they're not messing around and they're not going to take any chances with you. If you fail them significantly, you're just done.
And your family.
Yeah.
Like they clearly recruit people that have family. It's things to lose. Like They need methods of control, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And those methods of control are clearly based in
Pheromones.
some of the things we've learned about... Well, pheromones, yeah, but some of the things we've learned about the way organized crime or some kinds of shadowy intelligence groups or groups that are straddling the lines between those things tend to work, which is by grabbing points of pressure and leverage and using those to exact obedience and induce the behavior that they desire. That and inculcating some kind of loyalty, Where they're certainly presented as a fearsome adversary, whose true strength, I think, is probably not generally understood. The Orion Syndicate.
Yeah, because we see the Starfleet perspective of most things, but I think in broader Federation life, there's probably sort of an omnipresent Orion Syndicate.
Yeah, I wonder.
Like every city has some sort of Orion element.
I
on
wonder
every
if they
planet,
wouldn't.
probably.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the Orions be there?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't Ferengi be there? If there's money to be made.
Precisely. Right?
Especially if it's like a new colony or something easily exploited by the Orions.
And I think
they're probably not on Earth much.
Well, and I would bet you may not see many Orions on Earth, but you may have
maybe
Orion. You may have Syndicate people on Earth.
Maybe.
That could be. I mean, you look at the kind of the picture of Boston we get at the opening of the first episode of Picard, and that's a city that looks like it's got some gritty stories to tell in the midst of all that flashy sci-fi prettiness.
A few bar fights.
Yeah, one or two.
Riker can't hold his liquor.
Was
Burnham a criminal?
Oh yeah, she's a mutineer. Oh yeah, definitely a criminal. I don't think you could call her a career criminal.
No,
but yeah, I mean, she screws
was
up.
Was she
something
a
fierce.
criminal or someone who was
insubordinate? No, I mean that takes us into the realms of military justice and the degree to which insubordination in that context can be understood to constitute a criminal act, a trespass against the order of things. And I think in that respect, she's committed a truly inadvertently heinous, but nonetheless a heinous crime.
I mean, she did kill that Klingon.
And she fired on their fleet first, and she subdued her captain. Didn't she use a Vulcan nerve pinch on Georgiou?
Oh, geez, did she?
I think
she pulled a gun on her.
She did that too.
Yeah.
And then Georgiou got killed.
Yeah. but once they went into that mission together, they sort of kind of came together in that moment.
But it's a pretty
killed my favorite character in that show.
Oh, she was a great character. Georgiou was great. Yeah. But yeah, she's definitely like Paris
always
and
silly
Ro
on the
and
bridge.
others.
No, not always, but I do like it. One of my favorite opening introductory moments for a captain. I love that line. She had a certain laid back quality that was awesome. I would have loved to have seen more of that version of Georgiou.
Yeah. No, I think Burnham was definitely a criminal. But she was, well, let's say this. Maybe she's not a criminal, but she was definitely a convict. And she committed a crime. And there's some distinction in there that I'm searching for as sort of the distinction between, say, acts one might
because
commit.
Her redemption story isn't one seeming of a criminal.
No, that's true. It's someone who sort of
messed up,
failed.
And then they're like, "Oh, well, you messed up.
Yeah,
give her another go."
But it's not as though she's committed or has become sort of habituated or involved in a life of continuous or generally criminal acts.
Like Tom Paris.
Like Tom Paris, for instance.
No, I kid. But I do love that line from the Doctor.
Oh, she's
like, isn't it great how we on Voyager, such a disparate crew from so many places, Starfleet, Maquis, Borg, even Mr. Paris. And we can all come together and work together.
I love how he ranks on Paris.
Oh, he just never stops with Paris.
It's such a low estimation of Paris's abilities.
Yeah, he definitely respects him the least of everyone on board. And then makes him his assistant.
Yeah. Oh,
Janeway
man.
makes him his assistant. Maybe that was his
Yeah, I'm not
weird
sure the
part of it.
doctor's thrilled about that at first.
Oh, you know what? I watched this the other day and I came up with a theory.
Okay.
Okay, because there's the whole. This is a huge tangent. It's
Okay.
nothing to do with criminality
All right.
at all. But I'm gonna talk about it now. Anyway, it's often stated how Harry was never promoted. Always an ensign,
Yeah.
despite saving the crew and being the most competent member on the crew for most episodes.
Pretty much, yeah.
But in the first episode, so my theory is based on the fact that he is just making up for the first episode for the rest of the series.
Okay.
And the captain never forgets the first thing. It's like first impressions, right?
Right.
So she doesn't really know Harry Kim. And it's, in the heat of that first episode, they're getting hit with that, whatever it is that kind of knocks them
Yeah,
into
yeah. The soliton wave or whatever it is. Yeah.
yeah. And Captain's just like, what's going on? And Harry's at ops, and he's just like, there's some sort of thing out there, Captain. And she's just like, super pissed. You're gonna have to do better than that, Ensign.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell the captain there's some sort of thing out there. Like, Harry building himself up as the young upstart and everything, and that's the first thing he tells his captain in the worst situation they've ever been in. There's some sort of thing out there, Captain.
Do you think
So I
he's-
watched that, in her face, she's just like, what did he just say to me? So for
How
this
did
whole
you arrive
time,
on
she's
this
just like,
crew?
people are like, we should really promote Harry. She's just like, there's some sort of thing out
The
there
some
to
sort
go
of thing
take.
guy? No.
No.
He stays an ensign.
Not yet. So that's my theory. He's just had never quite made
That's
up for
hilarious.
that in the 7 years. But, another couple more years, she might have forgot about it. But there's some sort of thing out there. Oh, whoops, now we're in the Delta Quadrant.
Some sort of thing. Oh,
Yeah. Anyway,
I can
tangent.
dig that. I can dig that thing now.
But it makes the most sense
Absolutely.
because he deserved a promotion other than that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Poor guy.
Some sort of thing out there, Captain. First impressions, Harry. Well,
Yeah.
we've talked about the Orion Syndicate, but there are other, kind of, and Kivas Fajo,
Sure.
but there are other kind of kidnappers and slavers out there as well. Voyager workforce, they steal people. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that whole society's become criminal because they just kidnap people and turn them into
Yeah.
slaves that don't know they're slaves.
Well, and out of a kind of total cultural stultification, right? They don't have technical ability. They don't really have moral ability anymore. They can't. They just can't really reason the
It's
rate
like,
of a
look, the
paper
machine's
bag.
got to run.
Yeah.
Machine's got to run.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
exactly.
one of those cultural things where it's like they've ingrained that into their culture, so it's not criminal anymore to them.
No, and that again, I think would be one of those questions about whether it's criminal to us or criminal to the people,
Ferengi laws?
right?
Like, that comes up all the time. I didn't break
Oh,
any
Ferengi
Ferengi law. I'm a Ferengi. No.
But yeah, there seem to be a lot of people who understand the advantage of space to be the fact that they can just, it's just so vast. Like, how are you ever going to
And
find me? You know?
There's so many people that probably don't know where they are, or there's some where they don't understand.
Absolutely, right?
Not everybody has Starfleet computers and universal translators. Like there's the albino in the DS9 episode.
Sure.
He,
Sure.
from what they
sure.
say, had many slaves. That's
Yeah.
how they found him. He discarded one of them. And
That's right.
Kang
That's right.
found her.
I
And
forgot about that.
He fed and clothed her.
Yes.
And then got the secret info.
Yeah.
It's a great episode.
That guy's what a
Albino
terrible,
sucks.
terrible guy.
Yeah. They got him, though.
That's true. That's true.
Smugglers and thieves.
Oh, there's so many good ones. Well, I mean, one of my favorites got to be Vosh. Oh, I mean, that whole episode is just full of great criminals.
Bosch is great, and she just fell off my list at the very end.
Oh, really?
She was number 5 for quite a while.
Oh, right on. Yeah, Vosh has got those two.
But then I came to realize I actually don't really like Bosch. Like, good character
Yeah, yeah.
and played well, but it's just...
Well, she's not a nice person. She's
No.
not. She's not a likable.
No.
But like the two idiotic time travelers that are also chasing around in that episode.
Yeah,
or like the
Paratus and...
What's the Ferengi's name?
oh, jeez.
Do we ever get his name? I don't know.
No,
if we
he's
get
just
his
the Ferengi in the Hawaiian shirt, isn't he? But
name. He's. Oh yeah.
maybe his name. He's played by Max Grodenchik, who plays Rom.
Is he?
He is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, go back and watch that again. It's way better.
That's so cool.
But yeah, there's a lot of so much room for smuggling as well. Like so many planets that are probably so curious about other planets.
Oh, yeah.
And just someone can just go take something. It's just like, look what I have, this artifact from Vulcan.
And when you look at the ways they can mess with the readings that come out of their ships, you can see how, and we see Quark and the others doing that on the way to Earth and Little Green Men.
Yeah, there's a lot of way to mask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It must be tremendously simple in some ways to be smuggling, but the end point would be the complicated bit, you know? Like how you get it to the people you want when there might be a planetary security grid or sensors or a station in orbit or something like that, right? That to me would be the tricky part. I suppose it's always the tricky part, isn't it?
In the DS9 episode, I forget the episode, but there's Altovar, who seems to be a smuggler in medical and genetic material.
Is he the fellow that wants the hollow scan of Kira?
No, he's the one who wants the gel.
Oh, the yes, yeah. The whatever.
Biomimetic gel.
Biomimetic gel.
The biomimetic gel, and
yes,
he just wants to trade for it. He's just like, hey, Quark. He's like making Quark do it. He's like, hey, Bashir, can this guy wants some biomimetic gel? He's just like, it's illegal for you to even ask me that. Quark. He's like, I know, I told him that, but he made me do it. He really wants this gel. It's like, well, he can't have any.
Oh,
and then like Bashir catches him breaking into his office trying to steal it later on.
Oh yeah.
Imagine, because then again, there's so many planets, and some of them are so much more advanced than other ones. That creates another whole avenue for criminality.
Yeah, things that you could synthesize with your replicator they couldn't, or for that matter, unreplicatable elements, which is a whole other realm of smuggling, right? Whether it's latinum or other things that are too complex or too unstable or too difficult to replicate.
Or people within the Federation that will say, it's not my prime directive.
Yeah, because your civilian Federation citizen may have a very different sense of how all this operates, right? They're out on a colony world somewhere, needing to survive.
Mm-hmm. The Iosians, here's a good one.
The Iosians.
Yes.
Well, that's not an original series thing?
Yes, in the episode A Piece of the Action.
Oh, Bella Oxmix.
Bella Oxmix and Jojo Krakow.
Oh, yeah, with Flivers.
And Zabo.
And the great scene of Captain Kirk trying to drive a car and doing it so badly.
Yep.
I love, they just like
it's
stall all the way down this. That is
the kid they hired to help them. The kid's just like, you guys must be really desperate. And Spock's just like, well, why would you say that? He's just like, well, you're trying to hire me, and I'm a little kid.
Oh, they must. They're so alien on that world. It's great.
Bella's hilarious too.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I run this whole town. He's like, except for the small fry, but I burn them once I get around to it.
But I mean, the question there to me is, given that the whole planet operates under the sort of lights of this kind of mafia code book that they have.
Well, it was a Federation vessel visited there, and they left them some things like how to build radios and some other things like that, but also a fiction book.
That's what it is. They left them a novel, didn't they? Yeah.
About mafia stuff. And they didn't know the difference. But, well, the thing is, the main takeaway that the original survey of the Iosians was that they were incredibly imitative. Mm-hmm. That was like the main kind of
they were very
feature of their...
Well, yeah.
So, yeah, they just got hooked on that novel.
And, I mean, to me, that asks the question again in a different way than we were asking before. Are they themselves on their own planet criminals? Or are they just operating the way they operate?
I suppose according to Bella Oxmix, the small fry are criminals.
Right? Like, did the sort of Mongolian tribes on the steppes 1,000 years ago, when they were clashing and running over top of each other and absorbing each other to try and find a bigger Khagan, were they criminals or were they just practicing as they did?
See, that's what I was thinking too, but upon rewatch again, I got the impression they must have police on their world.
Okay.
Because Spock says to Bella, or maybe it was Krakow, but he says, you have a very arresting personality, sir. And he's just like, I've never been arrested in my life. So they must have some concept of being arrested by somebody.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? Maybe that's just like a kind of
A holdover
word for
from
bad.
the book. Or,
Yeah, like I ain't never been arrested means like, I have never been
Yeah, maybe.
defeated or stopped, or maybe they think the big house is the afterlife or something, right? Or Sing Sing, that sort of thing,
Interesting.
It's sort of like the question of one of those, what are they called? Cargo cults,
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But
That's a really lovely episode.
They're all walking down the streets with Tommy guns and everything. So basically a world of criminals.
Yeah.
But there's also the TO episode For Whom Gods Destroy, where you get Captain Garth and Marta the Orion.
Marta the Orion. Oh, okay.
Now, they're in prison for the criminally insane.
Okay.
And the Enterprise is going there to drop them off medicine that will apparently treat all of these different mental illnesses.
Right.
So they go down there, and Captain Garth is there, who Kirk looked up to as one of the great captains of Starfleet.
That's not Garth of Einar or whatever it is?
Yeah, he calls himself Lord of something. Yeah.
Yeah, because technically he fought in the Klingon Federation War.
Yeah.
Yeah, around Battle of Axanar and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he ends up on a planet for. I forgot this episode entirely.
Yeah. He goes insane, I guess, and he ends up there, and he starts calling himself Lord of whatever. And Kirk keeps calling him Captain Garth. He's just like, no, it's Lord Garth. He's like, oh, of course.
Oh,
but
man.
it's just an interesting episode on how they sort of thought of criminal behavior maybe back in the 60s, where it was...
Incoming transmission.
Or maybe just an idea of criminality in general, whereas it's just one injection away of being gone.
Sure. In some ways, that kind of reminds me of some of the ways that criminality was treated in decades even further past, maybe the treatment of phrenology or the sort of questions about brain activity that would have promoted the origins of, say, lobotomy as a practice, and how fantastically popular lobotomy was for a while, right? And I think, that's one of the things that Star Trek does both wittingly and unwittingly portray in the way that the stories are told, are contemporary attitudes around science, technology, and what the human being is in and around that, And certainly there were kinds of treatments and medications coming online at the time that Star Trek was coming out that would have seemed, and probably to the people who were experienced, that would have seemed, right? Things like this. Some of the early treatments that was a bit later than some of the early LSD treatments and things. But yeah, treatments like this, which were demonstrating profound efficacy in the treatment of sometimes otherwise intractable disorders, right?
Another smuggler we didn't talk about is the great smuggler Galen.
Galen. Oh, yes. He had an illustrious career.
Yeah, he's a smuggler of, archaeological artifacts.
Yeah, I mean, high-end smuggler.
Yeah.
Doesn't work for just anybody.
No.
But does his work well.
Himself, Baran,
maybe. Yeah. What a monster Baran is.
Yeah. Again, just like... hire a crew.
Yeah.
You don't need to implant control chips in people.
Yeah. I mean, that's a guy who's so untrustworthy that this is how he projects onto other people, right? Or just does it out of the cruelty of his own heart.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Baran's
Baran's
finds it more efficient. He had too much turnover.
Yeah, right?
Just losing crew left and right. It's funny because you're not a nice guy, Baran.
It's because you keep shooting them, guy, when they disagree with you. Yeah, I mean, he was a real menace, literally, to society. He would have brought down Vulcan society with the Stone of Gaul had...
Or the psionic resonator.
Oh, sorry, the psionic resonator. I apologize. That's right. Wrong name.
Yeah, I mean, that could have destroyed more than just Vulcan.
Sure. Yeah, it could have broken a lot of cultures. That's true. And of course, I mean, he didn't care. He was just doing it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
And that part, living cognitively so separate from other people that the connections between us that are just sort of given in our existence together are invisible, is the thing that comes out so strongly with Baran and that crew in that show, They're just completely sort of this little world flying through space doing their bad stuff.
Mm-hmm. Con artists.
Oh,
We've seen a lot of those in Star Trek.
Oh, there's tons of great
Ardra.
ones. Yeah.
Pretended to be the
devil
on every planet. Feklar.
Oh, yeah.
You are not Feklar.
I like her Feklar.
She's a good Feklar.
He's so ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rasmussen's a good one.
Yeah, good con artist.
Yeah.
Martis Major.
Martis Major.
Yeah.
Who's that now?
Martis Major is the El Orion we see on Deep Space Nine who ends up competing with Quark.
Right.
Huge con artist. He just listens
Right.
and listens until he can get the information to exploit you and then takes all your money.
Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah.
He's a really interesting guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Played by Chris Sarandon.
Yeah.
Who's the voice of Jack Skellington.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's an interesting connection. Mind blown.
Mind blown.
That's great. He reminds me of the half, Troy Species.
Betazoid.
Guy that they meet in on The Next Generation when they're debating over the wormhole.
Oh, yeah, the Belgian wormhole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The negotiator film
Mm-hmm.
that Troy gets involved with.
Yeah.
He reminds me of Major a little bit.
Yeah.
He's got that same kind of sense of
Smarminess.
yeah, and just like kind of oiling his way in under your skin, you know.
Yeah. Good character, though. I like that episode. Just a strange gambling device that you just press it and it lights up a few times and you're like, yay, I won. Or,
Oh
"Yay, I
yeah,
didn't."
that's right.
Doesn't seem very fun, but
Yeah.
future entertainment.
I mean, this kind of brings us back around again to the question of Quark.
No, rejected. Moving on.
What?
Moving on.
I can't believe you.
Arms dealers. Arms dealers, Dave.
Oh.
So speaking of Ferengi, you wanted to talk about Ferengi, I gather.
Quark.
Ferengi. So Cousin Gala is an arms dealer. He sells weapons. It's highly illegal. I mean, it allowed him to buy a moon. Highly illegal. And
Yes.
that's a criminal. And of course, he worked with Hogarth.
So you're calling Quark small time?
I'm talking about Cousin Gala. I'm talking about arms dealers, Dave. I'm talking about Cousin Gala and Hogarth. Who?
Oh, Haga.
Who, actually? No, I see why you're bringing up Quark, actually, because Cousin Gala and Hogarth manipulated Quark into working with them in their illegal dealings.
So Quark's a dupe?
For a short time. Look, he is somebody with strong family ties. Would never suspect his beloved cousin Gala,
Oh.
of manipulating him in any way. You know, Cousin Gala says, Quark, let's make some honest profit. You know, selling weapons.
I'll just point you back to the rules of acquisition.
And Hogarth himself, an honorable fellow, says, Quark,
Treat your employees like family.
You are a man in debt, he
Exploit
says.
them.
You cannot. I see you've been studying up.
Listen, your teachings are not entirely lost on me.
But Hogarth says, Quark, you're in debt. You cannot be paid until your debt is paid. You know, honorable sort. Honorable sort. That's why Quark was confused and didn't realize he was dealing with criminals.
I see. His own high moral qualities.
Well, you
make
know,
him blind to
he's
that
not
sort of
immune
thing,
to a bit of flattery, Quark, you know.
That's true. That's true.
You flatter me, sir. You flatter me. Like, you'd never hear that from Quark. He'd be like, you're right, I am great, aren't I?
That's true.
I am a good
Might
host.
lead to Umox.
Always make time for Umox. That's a rule
Listen.
of acquisition.
Always make time for
Assassins.
Oh.
Definitely criminals.
Yeah.
Doing a job.
Yeah.
Not a legal job, I don't think, in most jurisdictions.
No, I don't think so.
Klingon territory, perhaps. At least
There's
if you
there's
can
a certain
finagle some
legitimacy.
honor in there, you know.
There's a legitimacy to assassination, even if it's an illegal act, for
So
sure.
you killed this person, you know, but he really angered me first.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was really
I
offended.
was,
I
he,
was so mad.
he stepped on my foot. I said, excuse me. He said,
Yep.
As you can see, I had no other recourse.
That's pretty much. Said I did not cook the shrimp very well.
You know.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, we get some great assassins and
eliminating
sort of hitters. Even Garrick does some of that kind of work from time to time.
Nausicaans are usually available for such a thing.
Yeah, they're kind of heavies, aren't they?
Ratea, of course.
Retea, right.
Odo says that assassins generally don't like to vary their methods.
Sure.
That's how he knew it wasn't Retea. He was just going to come here and poison you. If that didn't work, then it didn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oddly, I mean, when you really look into it, you look into sort of like a lot of the people who get caught as criminals. Most are not people who are planning to be that on purpose, right? Like they get mad and they plan to do something awful to somebody, or they have some sort of thrill seeking and they're really bad at disguising it or covering their tracks. You know, these sorts of things are very, very common elements of a good segment of criminal behavior. It's very, very few people who are determined, lifelong, disciplined, skilled, habitual criminals. You know, much like it's very difficult to find anybody who plays, you know, tennis at the Wimbledon level on your average street corner. You know, they're all off playing tennis at Wimbledon because that's what they do with their entire life.
What you say about lifelong criminals makes me think of the Voyager episode Repentance.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched that episode recently, and it is thick, that episode. Like, it, not a single sentence is wasted in that episode. That's the one where I think they're called the Nigeans.
Mm-hmm.
They help them because their ship broke down or whatever. But they're a prison ship, so they bring aboard the prisoners and the guards. And the Nigeans control a sector of space that, of course, includes other species as well. I think they're called the Batakians, maybe, the other ones.
So, yeah.
There's two prisoners that do most of the talking, and everything they say for like at least the first half of the episode is just like very profound. And they're working on who they think are easy marks. You know, one of them's working on Neelix, and one of them's working on Seven, and the Doctor somewhat, the easy marks. So one of them says to Neelix says, "I heard you murdered somebody." He's just, "Well, yes, I'm Batakian." And Neelix is like, "Well, what does that mean?" He's just like, "Well, there was a murder. I was nearby, so I was arrested because I'm Batakian." And Neelix is like, "So you're saying you didn't do it?" He's like, "Of course I did it. I'm Batakian." Like, he never denies it.
Yeah.
Because it's that thing where, due to the circumstances, he was probably forced into criminality. But of course, then he's into criminality. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
like, that's
Yeah.
almost an
We're all
origin,
Ben Carnes,
almost
we're
an
all
origin
criminals.
story. There probably was a time where he was innocent and he was caught and put in jail, but now he's in the criminal system, and then he comes out and now he probably has killed people or something like that.
Could be, yeah.
And then,
yeah.
and then the other guy, they have him working on hopefulness, where he's just like, I used to look at the stars and the constellations and name them, and how he wishes he could be light, like the doctor. He's like, "So you don't feel any pain?" He's just like, "Well, my pride has been wounded once or twice, but no." He's just like, "I wish I could be made of light." And they're just like really showing you this plight of the Batakians. I keep saying Batakians. I hope that's right.
I think I was looking. I think it's Ben Carnes.
Oh, Ben
but very
Carnes.
close.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben Carnes. Yes, Ben, he's
But
like,
yeah, I mean,
I'm Ben
really,
Carnes.
it's a really poignant exploration of the, like, sort of the mental furniture, the mindset of a deeply occupied people, like hegemonized, beaten down to the point that their sense of themselves has been formed by this sense of overwhelming responsibility and absurd guilt. I mean, in some ways, the episode really creeped me out in that it reminded me of a book I taught many years ago in a program in which I was teaching at the time, called The Wretched of the Earth, by a guy named Frantz Fanon, who worked in Algeria in the 50s and was horrified by what he saw there, which one of the examples is that at the time, French citizens living in Algeria were allowed by law to shoot an Algerian if they saw them in their neighborhood, right? Because they were an Algerian. And they weren't supposed to be there, right? That's part of that to me is what this episode is redolent of. People who are by their assigned characteristic, whether it's Ben Karen or, Algerian or whatever it is, understood to be guilty because they exist, They're not, you're right, like it's transferred from being a question of somebody's responsibility to being a question of the kind of miasma of guilt sitting over the whole species from somebody else's perspective.
And Seven and the Doctor have a really kind of poignant conversation in this episode. Just when I was really digging the episode and thinking how deep it was, it just takes it an extra step further. And the Doctor's just like, it doesn't feel right because they've just found out that the prisoners are going to be sent to be executed. And immediately, like, the captain and Tuvok look at each other and they're just like, Tuvok's like, what were their crimes? And he's like, oh, they're all murderers. Some of them multiple murderers. So they back off a little bit, but they don't feel right about it. And the Doctor says he doesn't feel right about it. And Seven's just like, well, you may feel unusual sensations because she's fixing him because he was glitching.
Yeah.
And he's just like, no, I was referring to the arrangement the captain's made with the Nigeans. No matter how terrible the crimes these men committed, it seems wrong to hand them over to be executed. This is a Federation starship, not the barge of the dead, he says. And Seven says, would you prefer the captain release them? And he's just like, no, of course not. They're dangerous men. She says, well, executing them ensures they'll never pose a threat to anyone again. You know, Borg pragmatism. Yep. He's like, so would a life sentence. And the operative word being life, the Doctor says. And Seven says, well, confining them for life requires significant resources, and the Nigeans may not think that worthwhile. He says, well, what about rehabilitation? Given the chance, some of these men might become productive members of society one day. Seven says their victims won't have that same opportunity. And he says, well, that justifies taking their lives, an eye for an eye. That's not justice, it's revenge. Quite frankly, I'm surprised you're not troubled by such a barbaric system. And Seven says, I'm simply being objective. You often encourage me to see both sides of an argument. Like, they almost debate, like, all of criminality and justice and how to proceed with it in that one little conversation.
Yeah, and whether and what the question of responsibility is, how someone can be understood to be criminally responsible for an action. You know, that's a big problem right now. You know, how do we determine that someone was in a frame of mind where they were knowingly undertaking an action of the kind that we're now trying or considering them for, right? Yeah, it's a heavy thing because we're dealing with ultimately the question of, do we reduce or remove the freedoms and privileges of another because of their actions in the wider community? Or in some cases, do we remove their ability to continue being alive? Right? Do we just exile them from the world entirely by virtue of that? And that's a decision that's about the whole community. And I think one of the interesting pieces of that episode is the conversation with the Nigean family. And it's not like a clear-cut conversation, you know, but... Yes,
they have a saying...
the guy says, eco, whatever he says, is he's willing to die.
Vecto valet cavadum, he says. Vecto valet cavadum, which is what the victims prefer, basically.
Yeah.
So the victim gets to set the punishment, which is interesting. That kind of takes eye for an eye to kind of legal level in a way.
Sure.
You can, because they mention how some people got off entirely. Someone committed a crime and the family just happened to be very forgiving.
Sure.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, there are lots of ways of thinking about that. You know, the medieval and particularly the Scandinavian, but Northern European practice of weregild, the practice of paying fines or making some kind of satisfaction when a trespass had occurred, has certainly found a place in our own notion of like tort or civil law, for instance, and some aspects of criminal law as well, in the sense that we can try and make amends or reparation or try and make some kind of a gesture, symbolic or financial or social, to try and express both our sense of responsibility and guilt, but also the desire to make somehow good on what's happened, right?
The Shoot is another interesting episode of Voyager about criminals and how they were treated as a social experiment, whereas they're all giving a chip that keeps them tense and aggravated, just to see how a bunch of tense and aggravated people can get along together.
Oh, yes.
One of the better Tom Paris episodes too. Really good acting from Robert Duncan McNeil.
Yeah, that's a really interesting episode.
He's almost near death at the end, Sean Paris.
Yeah.
He destroys their way out, hallucinating.
Yeah, he's in a pretty bad way by the end of that episode.
It's a good episode.
But,
Again, an interesting episode about criminals and
that's for
one
sure.
of the ways in which criminals are treated as subhumans.
Mm-hmm. And that's been a long discussion in human justice systems as well, right?
You know who's an interesting criminal?
Who's that?
Graython Tolar.
Oh,
Good old Graython.
Graython Tolar.
Graython Tolar was hired by Garrick and Benjamin Sisko in the Pale Moonlight to make an illegal holographic program on an optilistic data rod.
Yes, had to be convincingly Romulan in its style.
Yeah,
I
convincingly
mean, in the
Dominion.
optilistic rod.
Well,
But-
Cardassian. There were Cardassian.
was it
papers.
Cardassian rod?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I apologize. Yeah. No, it was a Romulan
They had it.
ambassador. That's right.
One of my favorites.
Oh yeah, what a great guy.
Greenback.
Great character. But yeah, that is one of those moments where Cisco goes right overboard in terms of what.
Well, Sisko becomes at least an accomplice to criminality.
Absolutely.
If not a criminal himself.
And I think Garrick's question on that, like, didn't you know what you wanted when you asked me to do this, is pretty reasonable.
Considering your whole plan was to fraud the Romulans into the war.
Yeah.
Your whole plan here was just to lie to an entire race of people.
Yeah.
So, how clean did you think this was going to be?
Like, how clean are you?
Yeah.
Are your hands coming into
It's
this?
kind of a
buddy?
shaky foundation we're starting off with here.
Yeah. To pull that off, you're going to need to break a few.
But it also
omelets.
shows you the criminality that's developed around holodecks.
Uh-huh.
And
There's all sorts of criminal things to do with holidays.
yeah, I guess there is.
sure.
Like, I mean, even in the arms dealing episode with Haggis,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't smuggle weapons around to show them to people, but they could show them the holographic representations of the weapons, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and of course, you know, creepy putting Kira into a hologram for creepy Jeffrey Combs.
Although
That's definitely illegal.
Kira with Quark's head at the end is one of like those you'll never unsee this moments in your life, but it's so funny. Oh yeah. Talk about body horror.
Are the Maquis criminals, Dave?
Oh, that's really hard.
But it's a tough one, yeah. We could save that one for debate 9, perhaps. But
Well, I'll tell you how I would begin to reason about it.
okay.
And I'm not going to be able to provide a solution, so that's all I can do.
I mean, we've already established on this show that Commander Eddington is a great hero. On this very
That's
show,
true.
that has been established.
Also a criminal, though.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean,
We
he
didn't get into
specifically is
that,
definitely a criminal.
Yeah.
But the Maquis themselves, I think, to me, the question of that turns on whether the Maquis can be understood to be governed by any set of law. Other than
Technically,
their
they are
own
Federation
will.
citizens.
But haven't a number of
But they don't
those
claim to be
worlds-
themselves, I guess.
That's what I was thinking, because the colony world itself, under other descriptions of how the Federation works, has autonomy and can apply to be a Federation member world. Often will have a period during which, kind of like a child oblate in
And
a
you
monastery.
can leave the Federation, as we see in Picard.
Absolutely.
They lost a lot of members, or at least they were threatening.
Absolutely, right?
Lose
I had understood that at least some of those worlds had essentially rejected Federation membership after the way the treaty came down.
But does the Federation accept their resignation?
And in that case, who is
Arbitrates
trespassing?
that. Who can arbitrate that?
Who
I
can
guess.
arbitrate? But who's trespassing? Right? Are the Federation trespassing in Maquis space because they're trying to help out their Cardassian former enemies, now truce partners, so they don't start shooting at each other again? Like that's an awkward spot to me ethically. In that the Maquis, though, come into Federation space.
Proximity alert. Vessel approaching. The vessel is hailing.
Or go into Cardassian space and make attacks on them. I think in that respect, they can be considered as having undertaken criminal actions because they're not really recognized as a military as such. And so in that sense, it's not like they're fighting they're not declaring a war on somebody. But in that sense, they're like any number of groups of insurgents that we have in the world today. You know, the FARC or whoever it is, who are not necessarily forming a government, but who are administrating parts of large sections of geographies without necessarily the benefit of positive law or a constitution, which would give them some kind of legitimacy, sitting in and around that, right? And I think there's an analogy to be made there, not a perfect one.
We don't know how land ownership works in the Federation either, because they're colonists. They go to a world that's supposedly unowned.
Mm-hmm.
Do they now own it now that they're occupying it?
Yeah,
And
or
if
some sort of
so,
right of use anyway, yeah.
They would probably consider it illegal that their property was given away without their consent by the
Sure.
Federation. You know,
Their
it
home.
is very murky.
Yeah. I think certainly the Maquis has engaged in criminal activities.
Oh,
and there are definitely certain Maquis who are absolutely criminals.
Yes, they're definitely the terrorist faction of the Maquis, if not.
Yeah. And then the people that draw into their orbit, like Cassidy Yates.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be a whole network of people like that, smugglers and other clandestine operators.
Guilty by
who are supplying them.
association. I mean, it's not illegal to transport medical supplies to somebody who wants them. If that person is Maquis, then it is. You know?
Exactly, right?
Well, the only other thing I can think of about this criminality episode, Dave, that we haven't touched on, is what do you think it's like for Dax living as a former criminal? Because at least one of her personalities was a very psychotic criminal.
That's not Duran. Who was that? Was it Duran?
Was it Duran or Tarias? I think it's
Tarias.
I think it's Duran.
Yeah. And it gives us one of the greatest episodes of season 7 in Deep Space Nine. The sort of CSI episode.
Where she like meets the different versions of
No, where she's chasing the killer who's using the crazy phase rifle thing. That's right. She's chasing the killer, yeah.
That's a good
but
one.
yeah,
Field,
the Facets
Field of Fire,
episode was
that one's
also
called.
the Facets episode where all the other personalities surfaced was kind of beautiful that way too. And the episode where Dax is on trial,
like, who has to be
legally
Duran?
brilliant.
Benjamin's agreed to be Duran. I'm like, yes. I want to see Avery Brooks do this for sure, and it was great.
He's amazing.
Jadzia.
I do like Odo's Curzon as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Odo's Curzon is just pure delicious.
I remember that time you took up with that girl on. It was
great. Man. Yeah, I think Dax, at least Jadzia, had the wisdom to let herself be different. I think Ezri's problem of always trying to find where she fits and risking being submerged by all those other personalities is a more complex challenge psychologically. For sure. And
to Ezri, it's more of just an equal part of all of this that she has to deal with, whereas Jadzia, it's more like that was like an eighth of the things I have to deal with.
Yeah.
There was 8 people. That's one. Those other 7 can override that one pretty easily, whereas Ezri's just like, oh no, that's like a crazy thing I have to deal with.
Yeah, like that's the big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, in some ways, I think that illustrates really nicely the difference between Jadzia's passionate but ultimately analytical nature and Ezri's analytical but ultimately passionate nature.
Yeah, very well put.
You know? Because, I mean, as a therapist, she's sharp and she knows what she's doing, but she has huge feelings.
Which can help with that.
Absolutely. It's through those things that we can actually empathize with others. But that empathy is definitely a double-edged sword for Ezri.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we wrap this one up?
It would be a crime not to.
Before we dare study criminality, therefore be studied by criminality.
Oh, beware ye who fight monsters, lest a monster ye become. Indeed. And with those words of our great friend Friedrich Nietzsche, end transmission. Where'd you get that harmonica from?
Snuck it in.
Snuck it into a holding cell?
Yeah.
That can't be pleasant.
Look, Odo's very perceptive, but he doesn't look everywhere.
True enough. And honestly, you know, I mean, I thought that was uncalled for on Quark's part.
Yeah, I can't believe he pressed charges.
Over one strip of latinum?
One guy he liked our song, gave us a little bit of latinum.
Yeah.
On my premise, not on my premises, he says.
Don't have a contract, he says. Thumbprint here, please, he says.
I still don't understand why Odo went along with it.
I know, you'd think he'd leave us there just to annoy him. But, maybe shapeshifters don't have much of a sense of, pitch.
Badatumo, Shojaduro, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Madakudo, Jidak Maju, Ardak Jeba, Burak Chuka, Telbarnegu, Mugo Tudu, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Badatumo, Shojaduro, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Bonal Radish, Norver Barish, Gejoy Kelbaj, Gedaroki, Badatumo, Shojaduro, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Badatumo, Shojaduro, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Madakudo, Shidakwaju, Ardak Jaba, Urak Chuka, Delbarnegu, Mugatodu, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Banajadish, Dore Barish, Gejoy Kelbaj, Gedaoki, Badatumo, Shojaduro, Yajakeo, Yajakeo, Yajakeo. Victory?
Of a sort.
Let's get out of this station.
Yeah. We're going on
We're
tour
going on tour to Galorndon Core.
at warp 3.4!
Woo!
Oh, that's really slow.
Oh.